The Galactic powers had been locked in their Cold War for so long that no one could quite remember how it began. The Varelian Concord and the Jar Dominion had grown accustomed to their tense, calculated existence. The galaxy was vast, and the vastness itself seemed to dictate that no one would dare push beyond their established borders. The war was more of a series of sporadic skirmishes than a true conflict. Battles were slow, strategic, and fought with a level of precision that bordered on the surgical. Old admirals and generals built their reputations on knowing exactly where and when to strike, and entire fleets were designed to operate like well-oiled machines, bound by treaties and protocols that had lasted for centuries. In the middle of this quiet but deadly standoff, Earth had barely begun to make its mark. Humanity's entry into the galactic arena had been little more than a footnote, a young species that, despite its tenacity and ambition, seemed outclassed by the ancient powers that ruled the stars. Earth's ships were clunky, rudimentary compared to the sleek, battle-ready designs of the Varelians and Jar. Their tactics, reliant on basic strategies that focused on brute strength and firepower, seemed outdated. No one expected Earth to make a difference, and in the grand scheme of things, perhaps they were right. At least, that's what the Varelian High Command thought when they dismissed the humans from the diplomatic summit on Gulfwar Station. The humans were inexperienced, their military a collection of makeshift fleets cobbled together from old transport ships, mining vessels, and experimental technology. They were no match for the well-established Varelian war machine, or so the Concord thought. But the incident that would change everything came without warning. The Jar Dominion, ever the aggressive neighbor, had taken matters into their own hands when a small civilian colony on Earth's frontier was destroyed in what was deemed an accidental training exercise. The devastation was catastrophic. The Jar's response was typical: cold indifference, a brief apology, and a reminder that human life had always been insignificant in the vast expanse of the galaxy. Earth, as always, had been an unimportant player. Until that moment. The human government's response, however, was far from diplomatic. Fueled by a sense of betrayal and a burgeoning need to prove their worth, Earth's Council of Defense declared an end to their neutrality. The Jar would pay for the destruction of their colony, and Earth would make sure the galaxy knew they were not to be dismissed. When Earth's military mobilized for war, it wasn't a grand fleet of polished ships, but a hastily assembled group of whatever the humans could muster. Old freighters were retrofitted with rudimentary weapons. Mining drones were modified for combat. They weren't the best, they weren't even the most advanced, but they were human. And humanity was known for one thing above all: its unpredictability. The first battle was small, barely more than a skirmish, but it would be enough to send a shockwave through the galaxy. The Jar, who had expected an easy victory, were caught off guard. Earth's fleet swarmed them like locusts, moving in ways the Jar had never anticipated, using technology they couldn't comprehend. And as the first volley of fire was exchanged, one question echoed through the galaxy: what had Earth just unleashed? The first strike was a statement, but it was only the beginning. In the days following the destruction of the Jar colony, Earth's military planners scrambled to assemble a fleet that could match the scale of their newfound mission. They didn't have the luxury of time or resources. They had only their creativity, their will to fight, and their unpredictability. They had to make do with what they had. The United Earth Defense Pact, UEDP, formed hastily in response to the crisis, was an uneasy coalition of military forces, civilian engineers, and tech innovators. Ships that were designed for mundane tasks, like freight transport or asteroid mining, were stripped down, reinforced, and outfitted with weaponry. Mining drones were repurposed as reconnaissance and strike units, while modular defense systems were constructed in secret, designed to counter the high-powered weapons of their foes. Despite the ragtag nature of the fleet, there was a singular vision: survival. Humanity's technological capabilities were far behind the ancient galactic powers, but they had something none of the other factions possessed: the ability to innovate on the fly, to adapt in ways the old war machines couldn't. And when it came to space combat, Earth was about to make its mark. The first operation was a surprise raid. UEDP Commander Lena Valdez, a veteran of Earth's early skirmishes, led a small force of modified freighters and drone fighters into Jar territory. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and without proper fleet coordination, but they had one distinct advantage. They weren't bound by traditional tactics. As they dropped out of hyperspace just beyond Jar-held space, the fleet scattered in all directions, using the gravity wells of nearby moons to hide their ship's signals. The Jar weren't expecting such a maneuver. Their ships were designed to engage in conventional fleet battles, with formations that were rigid and predictable. Earth's fleet, however, moved in disjointed patterns, some ships retreating, others advancing in sudden bursts of speed. Commander Valdez had implemented a tactic that the Jar had never seen before, the swarm approach. Earth's ships were small, lightweight, and designed for one purpose: agility. Instead of engaging in long-range, slugfest-style combat, Earth's ships darted in and out of Jar defenses, firing at critical points before quickly retreating. The attack was chaotic, frenetic, and unpredictable. The Jar cruisers, large and lumbering, struggled to track the fast-moving Earth vessels. The first clash came when Valdez's flagship, a repurposed mining transport dubbed the Leviathan, slammed into a Jar frigate's shields. The impact was insignificant, but the feedback pulse from the ship's advanced electromagnetic disruptor systems temporarily disabled the Jar frigate's targeting systems. In that critical moment, a swarm of drones, simple machines designed to function like autonomous torpedoes, tore through the Jar ship's hull. It was a game-changer. The Jar fleet, caught completely off guard, couldn't regroup fast enough. The battle unfolded in fits and starts, as Jar ships tried to return fire, only to be harassed by human drones or blindsided by quick, calculated hits. Commander Valdez's fleet, though smaller, struck like a swarm of hornets, each hit coming from an unexpected angle, each ship vanishing before retaliation could take place. By the end of the day, the Jar had lost 3 vessels, including a destroyer-class ship, and they were left reeling, struggling to grasp what had just happened. A ragtag fleet of humans had delivered a decisive blow, and the galaxy was watching. Across the stars, the Varelian Concord and the Jar Dominion began to reconsider their dismissive views of the human species. No longer were they a nuisance to be ignored. Earth was showing them something they hadn't seen before, something new, something dangerous. And as the shattered remains of Jar ships drifted into the cold void, one thing was clear: humanity was no longer just a footnote in galactic history. They were a force to be reckoned with. The aftermath of the Jar strike sent ripples through the galaxy. The once dismissed humans had dealt a devastating blow, and the 2 dominant powers, the Varelian Concord and the Jar Dominion, found themselves in an unfamiliar position. On the back foot, what they'd once dismissed as a primitive species now stood as a dangerous, unpredictable adversary. In the days that followed, the galaxy was abuzz with whispers of the Earthling swarm, a new kind of warfare that the galaxy's strategists couldn't comprehend. The human fleet's hit-and-run tactics, unpredictable movement, and out-of-the-box technology had caused an unprecedented disruption to the galaxy's established battle protocols. Traditional fleets, once proud and invincible, now seemed inadequate when faced with this new kind of adversary. The Jar were the first to try to adapt. In response to their defeat, the Jar High Command ordered the development of new countermeasures: faster, more maneuverable warships designed to catch the Earthling fleets in their own game. But they quickly learned that replicating Earth's tactics was not so simple. The key to Earth's success wasn't just speed or firepower, it was their ability to improvise. Every human vessel, no matter how small or poorly equipped, had been retrofitted with experimental tech: holographic decoys, adaptive cloaking fields, and quantum jammers that could distort an enemy's targeting systems. Earth's ships moved like nothing the Jar had ever encountered. They didn't just fight. They disrupted everything the Jar had learned about space combat. Every battle felt like a one-sided ambush. The Virelian Concord wasn't much different in its response. The Virelians, who prided themselves on their strategic superiority and their highly regimented fleet tactics, began to review their doctrines. They were able to hold the line in skirmishes, but even they couldn't ignore the growing threat from Earth. Their ships, sleek and precise, could no longer predict the erratic behavior of human ships. The Virelian Imperial Navy scrambled to adopt countermeasures, but they had always relied on their rigid, systematic approach to war. They didn't know how to combat chaos. In the aftermath of these initial battles, an undeniable truth began to emerge. Humanity's greatest weapon wasn't its ships, its guns, or even its technology. It was the mind behind the battle. Humans were problem solvers, quick thinkers who thrived in chaos and turned it into an advantage. While the galactic powers spent decades honing their perfect fleets and adhering to their well-defined combat strategies, humanity had only just begun to learn the ropes, and they were already rewriting the book. In an emergency summit on the Concord capital, Admiral Talson, the supreme strategist of the Virelian fleet, stood before his officers, staring at the reports coming in from the front lines. His face was tight with frustration. "We cannot predict them," he said quietly. "They're not playing by the rules. They are the rule breakers." A senior officer, exasperated, slammed a fist onto the table. "Then we must break them first. If they don't follow our rules, we will impose ours upon them." But Talson wasn't so sure. As much as he hated the idea, the truth was settling in. The Virelians weren't ready for a war that was being fought on the humans' terms. What's worse, every time they thought they had Earth's tactics figured out, the humans adapted, learning faster than the galactic empires ever thought possible. The galaxy's veteran fleets were beginning to crack, their carefully honed tactics shattered. In every skirmish, the humans weren't just winning. They were reshaping the battlefield itself. The balance of power was shifting, and no one could predict what would come next. The galaxy's response to Earth's unexpected success was swift, but fractured. At first, many dismissed the human victory as an anomaly, a lucky strike, a momentary flash of brilliance that would fade just as quickly. But with each skirmish, with every battle Earth won, the unthinkable started to become undeniable. Humanity was changing the rules of warfare, and the galaxy's long-standing powers had no idea how to counter it. The Virelian Concord, once proud of its highly disciplined and calculated military tactics, now found itself on the defensive. Their flagship, the mighty Erythian, a symbol of their power, had been disabled in a swift, calculated attack by Earth's guerrilla forces. It wasn't destroyed, but the damage was severe. Its neutron shields had been overwhelmed by human pulse cannons, and its sublight drives rendered inoperable by a well-timed strike from Earth's newly developed scrambler torpedoes. The Jar Dominion, still reeling from their initial losses, began to reconsider their approach. Initially, their response had been typical: send a larger force, use overwhelming firepower, and crush the humans beneath a tide of guns. But Earth's unpredictability had turned that playbook on its head. Their smaller, more agile ships would dart in and out of combat, disappearing and reappearing at will, keeping the Jar constantly off balance. Each attempt to destroy a human vessel was met with new, unexpected technologies: decoys, cloaking devices, and electronic warfare systems designed to cripple targeting systems and confuse enemy sensors. The Concord and Jar began to realize they were facing a new kind of threat, one that could not be predicted or outgunned. Humanity's secret wasn't just in its weapons or ships, it was in its approach. Humans didn't adhere to the galactic protocols of warfare. They didn't have the centuries of tradition or the proud legacies of their alien counterparts. Instead, they relied on adaptation and innovation, core principles that had allowed them to thrive for centuries on their homeworld, where survival was always a matter of improvisation. The galactic strategists began to panic. Could they continue to maintain their dominance? Could they adapt to the rapidly evolving tactics of Earth's fleets? These were questions they had never had to answer before, and the answers were becoming harder to ignore. In the war councils of the Varelian High Command, there was an urgent discussion. Admiral Talson had been an influential voice in the strategy meetings, but now his confidence was beginning to waver. "We must understand them," he said, more to himself than to his officers. "We cannot afford to underestimate them any longer. If we don't find a way to adapt, we will be swept aside." Across the galaxy, Jar and Virelian commanders scrambled to deploy new tactics in the face of humanity's asymmetrical warfare. The Jar, known for their brute strength, began to retrofit their warships with heavier armor and upgraded energy shields. But Earth's fleets were still too fast, too nimble, and their swarming tactics were proving impossible to counter. The Virelians, on the other hand, began to implement more advanced algorithms in their battle strategies, hoping to match the adaptive AI that Earth had already begun to use. But no one could predict what Earth would do next. Their tactics weren't based on tradition or centuries of refinement. They didn't follow any established pattern. They weren't bound by anything except the drive to win. Humanity was not only a new power in the galaxy, they were reshaping what it meant to wage war. As the first major interstellar battle between the Jar and the Virelians took place, both factions watched in silent awe at the technology displayed by their adversary. Earth had emerged as a force of nature, a challenger not of tradition or convention, but of evolution itself. The galaxy would never be the same. The inevitable confrontation had arrived, and it was going to be like nothing the galaxy had ever seen. In the wake of the early skirmishes, both the Jar Dominion and the Virelian Concord realized the humans were no longer a small, insignificant force that could be easily dismissed. Earth's guerrilla tactics, unpredictability, and sheer ingenuity had forced both empires to reevaluate their strategies. But now, both sides, desperate to reclaim their dominance, were preparing for a showdown of unprecedented scale. It wasn't just about territory anymore. It was about sending a message. Whoever won this battle would control the fate of the galaxy. The Battle of Altair 9 would go down in history as the first true test of Earth's ability to face down the combined might of two ancient empires. The Jar and Virelians had forged an uneasy alliance in response to Earth's rapid expansion and the threat they posed. The two fleets, more than 50 ships between them, were massive, powerful, and designed to fight with devastating precision. They had been carefully coordinated, their strategies aligned for a single objective: obliterate Earth's forces once and for all. Earth's fleet, however, was far smaller. Commander Lena Valdez, once again at the helm of the Leviathan, had gathered a ragtag force of retrofitted ships, stolen technology, and makeshift drones. But what they lacked in numbers, they made up for in sheer adaptability. Humanity had developed a new trick: Quantum AI. The human fleet could now move as one, their ships communicating instantly through quantum entanglement, a technology that rendered the very concept of lag or coordination time obsolete. Every maneuver was executed in perfect synchronicity, every ship operating as part of a single mind. The battle began with a chilling silence. Earth's fleet entered Altair 9's system without any warning. The Jar and Virelian fleets were waiting, but they were waiting for a human fleet they thought they understood. They assumed Earth's tactics would be the same as before: erratic movements, isolated attacks, quick strikes. But when Earth's ships dropped out of hyperspace, they didn't scatter. Instead, they swarmed. For the first time, the galaxy saw what humanity could truly do when it had the element of surprise and the coordination of hundreds of ships working in perfect harmony. The Virelian flagship, the Earthlings, locked onto the nearest Earth vessel, its weapons charging with deadly precision. But before it could fire, a pulse of quantum disruption flooded the space around the ship, scrambling its targeting systems. The Earthlings' weapons fired blindly into the void, missing their mark entirely. At the same moment, dozens of Earth's AI-controlled drones descended on the Jar warships. They moved with relentless purpose, avoiding the heavy fire and overwhelming the Jar ships with sheer numbers and unpredictability. Every Jar ship was assaulted at once, each ship engaged in a battle it couldn't win. On the battlefield, Valdez's voice crackled over the comms, her calm command cutting through the chaos. Phase 2. Now. Suddenly, the entire Earth fleet blinked out of sight, using quantum slip drives that allowed them to move in and out of real space with such speed that no one could track their movements. The Jar and Varelians, who had based their entire combat strategy on tracking targets and maintaining formations, found themselves facing an invisible enemy. No fleet was more vulnerable than one that couldn't see its adversaries, and no one was better at exploiting that vulnerability than Earth. In a single coordinated push, Earth's fleet emerged from the slip drives, striking at the Virelian flagship and the Jar dreadnought simultaneously. The shock was overwhelming. The Jar fleet's shields buckled under the sustained assault, while the Virelian cruisers were torn apart by drone swarms that exploded in clouds of shrapnel. The once imposing warships crumpled like paper, their pride and power shattered in moments. The Battle of Altair 9 ended in a stunning victory for humanity. The Jar and Virelian forces were forced to retreat, leaving behind a debris field of their once unstoppable fleets. Commander Valdez's forces had not only held their ground but had utterly destroyed the joint armada. The galaxy was left reeling, unable to comprehend how a mere handful of human ships had toppled two of the greatest powers in known space. For the first time, the Virelians and Jar understood. Humanity wasn't a fleeting anomaly. They were a game changer. The aftermath of the Battle of Altair 9 was nothing short of cataclysmic. For the first time in centuries, the ancient empires of the Jar Dominion and the Virelian Concord were forced to reckon with an adversary they couldn't predict or control. The galaxy's power dynamics had shifted irreversibly, and Earth's unexpected rise had left every major faction scrambling to understand how to survive. In the war councils of the Jar Dominion, the mood was grim. Empress Shara, once a ruler who wielded unparalleled influence across the stars, stood in front of a holomap, watching as the wreckage of her fleets drifted into the void. Her voice was cold, but beneath the surface, fury bubbled. We were outmaneuvered, outpaced. A species that should never have been able to challenge us has done so, and we are left with nothing but debris. Her advisors were silent, their faces etched with defeat. The losses were far more than just ships. The Jar Dominion had been built on the premise of their unassailable military might. To lose so decisively to a species so young, so inexperienced in galactic warfare, was a blow to their very identity. Admiral Corrin, one of her most trusted military leaders, spoke up. "Empress, we cannot ignore them any longer. This isn't just a series of skirmishes. Earth has found something we cannot replicate. Adaptability. We must shift our entire strategy." Empress Shara narrowed her eyes. "What do you suggest?" "We must embrace the chaos, rather than try to control it," Corrin replied. "We have always relied on overwhelming force and predictable tactics. We've been caught in their swarm, but there's something we can learn from them. We should fight the war on their terms." It was a dangerous proposition, and one that would upend centuries of military doctrine. But the alternatives were unthinkable. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, the Virelian High Command was equally shaken. Admiral Talson had never seen such widespread panic among his officers. The defeat at Altair 9 had broken their perception of invincibility. Earth's victory wasn't just a tactical win, it was a cultural wound. The Virelians had long believed themselves to be the epitome of military precision and strategic excellence, but now they faced an unpredictable, guerrilla force that had rewritten the rules of war. "We have been outsmarted," Talson admitted in a rare moment of vulnerability as he addressed his officers. "Humanity is not just a challenge to our tactics. They are a challenge to everything we have built. We cannot afford to meet them with the same thinking. We must evolve." The discussion that followed was one of the most heated in Virelian history. Some advocated for a full-scale assault, throwing their fleet into one final desperate bid to crush Earth's forces. Others suggested forming alliances with the Jar to counter the threat, though that idea was met with suspicion and hostility. Yet, as the debate wore on, Taliesin stood firm. We cannot fight them as we have fought others. We must think like them. We must adopt their fluid, decentralized approach. If we do not, we will be swept away. It was a bitter pill for the Varelians to swallow, but they had little choice. If they were to stand any chance against Earth, they would have to shed their old ways of war. For the first time since the rise of Earth, the galaxy's superpowers found themselves in uncharted territory. Earth had not only proven its strength, but had forced the galaxy to rethink the very nature of warfare. And as the Jar and Virelian fleets began to rebuild, both empires began to adopt human tactics, incorporating unconventional strategies and embracing chaos. The galaxy, once a bastion of order and tradition, was about to be turned upside down. And Earth was at the center of it all. The ripple effect of Earth's victory at Alternine was still reverberating throughout the galaxy. In every corner of the cosmos, factions were grappling with the aftermath. The unexpected rise of humanity was no longer a topic of hushed whispers. It was a pressing reality that demanded attention, strategy, and, above all, caution. The once predictable order of galactic politics and warfare was beginning to unravel, and everyone, from the smallest outlying colonies to the most powerful empires, had to adapt or be left behind. Back on Earth, Commander Lena Valdez stood on the bridge of the Leviathan, watching as her fleet prepared for its next move. The battle had been won, but it was only the beginning. Her success had sent shockwaves through the galaxy, but humanity had yet to truly unify. Earth was still fractured, with various factions vying for control, not just in the physical realm but in the corridors of political power. If the rest of the galaxy was going to take them seriously as a military force, Earth needed more than just victories on the battlefield. It needed to show it could hold its ground, command respect, and lead. "We can't afford to be complacent," Valdez said to her senior officers. "Our success at Alternine gave us a moment of glory, but now the galaxy is looking for a weakness, and there will be those who seek to exploit it." She wasn't wrong. The galactic powers, despite their losses, were far from defeated. The Jar Dominion, with its new tactics embracing unpredictability, was rebuilding its fleets and starting to engage in more asymmetric operations of its own. The Varelian Concord, still smarting from its humiliation, had started to incorporate human strategies into its command structures, albeit grudgingly. These two powers were beginning to adapt, but they would not take the human threat lying down. They would soon return to challenge Earth once more. Beyond the old empires, even smaller factions began to move. The Solari Collective, a group of technologically advanced but isolated beings from the edge of known space, began to study human tactics in greater depth, seeing potential in Earth's approach. Their interest was both cautious and opportunistic. If Earth could hold its ground against the galactic titans, it could offer alliances or trade opportunities, or simply use Earth as a buffer zone between themselves and their historic enemies. Meanwhile, the Reichel Alliance, a group of pirate fleets that had long lived in the fringes of galactic society, saw an opportunity for exploitation. With both the Jar and Virelian forces weakened, they began to raid more aggressively, drawing Earth into skirmishes on the outer rim. These pirate groups, well aware of humanity's strengths and weaknesses, began using hit-and-run tactics of their own, hoping to destabilize Earth's grip on the region. But the greatest danger was not from these smaller factions. The unknown threat, an enigmatic alien race that had been watching the events unfold from the shadows of uncharted space, began to stir. Little was known about them, but reports began to surface of their immense power and their interest in Earth. They had been monitoring the human race for some time, and now, with the balance of power shifting, they were preparing to make their move. Valdez knew that Earth's victory could be short-lived if humanity failed to solidify its position. Earth was no longer just defending its right to exist in a hostile galaxy. It was positioning itself to play a dominant role in the interstellar future. But that future was filled with unknowns, and the galactic response would determine whether humanity could rise above its past or be consumed by it. "We're not just fighting for survival anymore," Valdez said, her voice steady and resolute. "We're fighting for the future of humanity. We need to make sure we don't just survive. We thrive." The galaxy was no longer the same. What had once been a collection of entrenched empires, each fighting for supremacy, was now in flux. Humanity had become the catalyst for this change, a force that could no longer be ignored. The Battle of Altair 9 had tipped the scales, but the struggle for dominance was far from over. Now, it was a matter of what humanity would choose to do with its newfound power. Commander Lena Valdez stood before the gathered leadership of Earth's unified command, the weight of the moment pressing down on her. Across from her were representatives from the Terran Federation, the Earth Coalition, and the newly formed Human Defense Alliance, an amalgamation of factions that had once been divided, but now stood together, united by their shared purpose. "We have already changed the course of galactic history," Valdez began, her voice steady yet filled with the gravity of the situation. "But now we faced the real test. Our victory at Altair 9 was just the beginning. The galaxy is watching, and the time has come for humanity to define its place in the cosmos." The room was silent, the leaders of Earth's factions uncertain but resolute. They had learned much in the past year. They had learned how to fight, how to adapt, and how to leverage their strengths. Earth had survived against all odds, but now came the real challenge. Could they thrive? "We've seen the responses from the Jar, the Varelians, and the smaller factions like the Reichel," Valdez continued, "but the unknown threat is still out there. We don't know their full power or their intentions, but we cannot let them catch us off guard again." One of the representatives, President Elaine Rowe of the Earth Coalition, spoke up. "If we focus only on defending ourselves, we will be reactive. We need to take the initiative. We've demonstrated that humanity can win battles, but now we need to ensure that our survival is secure. We need to show the galaxy that we are here to stay." Her words resonated with the assembly. They had won their first major battle, but the galaxy's established powers weren't going to lie down and let humanity take over. The Jar were already regrouping, and the Varelians, though wary, had not given up on their desire for dominance. It was clear that Earth's victory had only heightened their resolve to wipe out this new threat. But humanity's most significant challenge lay in the shadows, the unknown threat, a mysterious force whose motives remained unclear. "We need to form new alliances," Valdez said, tapping into the collective wisdom of the assembly. "Not just with the powers we know, but with those who have kept to the fringes. The Solari, the Kishari, the Venari, and others. We must build a coalition that rivals anything the galaxy has ever seen." Her words carried the weight of a truth that had become evident over the past months. Unity was humanity's greatest strength. The same qualities that had allowed Earth to endure against the odds, resourcefulness, adaptability, and a deep-rooted desire for survival, were now the foundation upon which they would build their future. As the assembly adjourned, Valdez stepped outside to the observation deck. She looked out at the vastness of space, a realm once dominated by powerful alien factions. Now, Earth had its place within it, a small but growing beacon of possibility. "We are just getting started," Valdez whispered to herself. In the distance, the flicker of distant stars seemed to echo her thoughts. The galaxy had been changed. Humanity had made its mark, and it was up to them to decide what came next. Would they rise to dominate, or would they shape a new order, one where survival was no longer a battle, but a shared goal among all? The dawn of a new era had begun.